Hi, this is Steve Addison for the Movements Podcast, the podcast for people who want to multiply disciples and churches everywhere. Today we're talking to Tom Hall about NoPlaceLeft Kansas City.
I had known this guy named Troy Cooper from Indianapolis, and we were friends, and we were both associate pastors on staff at local churches. And I just reached out to him about an annual event that we were doing together. And he said, "Hey, let's get together. I just got back from a mission trip in Southeast Asia. Let's sit down for coffee and talk about things." And so I sat down, and little did I know what Troy had just experienced. But at that point, he was looking back at it now. He had just looking for anybody he could train in this idea of multiplication and movements, because he had been exposed to that. So I was kind of left in the wake of Troy Cooper, and just my world was rocked, was turned upside down. I came to realize at that point in time that I was really good at discipleship. Maybe not really good, but I was adequate in discipleship. So I could, if the life of a disciple were to go from 0 to 10, I could take somebody from 1 to 9. New believer, I could train them how to read the Bible, how to pray. I could walk with them, learn to grow in their walk with Christ. But I did not know how to make a new disciple, and I did not know how to have disciples reproduce other disciples. And so as he was talking to me, he really just opened up the Great Commission and was asking me questions, diagnostic questions about the Great Commission in my own life and how I was doing with it. And all my background growing up from involvement with the Navigators just said, I should be doing this, and I'm not. And I was an associate pastor of youth and had all these youth at my disposal, but I wasn't really making disciples because they weren't making disciples. And so I just began to meet with Troy regularly, get coaching from him. Mm-hmm. Shortly thereafter, he left for Japan and left me on an island. You know, I had just gotten all this whirlwind, and my paradigm hadn't completely shifted yet. And I'm here in a legacy and established church, trying to do my best, and just struggling through it, quite honestly, trying to influence the discipleship process, trying to influence the youth. And then we just went through a really difficult time, both personally and as a church body, through our senior pastor moral failure and just a big mess. My wife and I went through just a really faith testing time, and my mentor was on the other side of the world, and I had no idea how to access him. And so I remember just feeling, just being steadied by God in my own faith, and given the grace to persevere through some really difficult times with our church. And really for me, it was like, when can I get out of this? When I want to make disciples, I don't want to deal with this ugliness that we're experiencing here. How can we get out? And was thinking through church planting, thinking through. I really wasn't thinking in terms of multiplication leading to church planting until Troy returned. And I said, like, here's my plan for church planting. He's like, well, why don't you just do what I told you to do? And I said, oh, I guess I could do that.
I think that's the secret to success in life, just to do whatever Troy Cooper tells you to do.
So I reconnected with him, and when he was back and had him do some training. At this point in time, he repackaged what he was training, where before it was just kind of movement principles, where now all of a sudden he had a really clear way of packaging that through 4 fields. And so we started to do that at our church, and began to train students in 4 fields, began to see some slow multiplication happening there at the church. And eventually God just removed us out of there. It was time to go. The mess of everything had kind of subsided, and we moved to Kansas City. And so in some ways running from what we'd come from, in other ways just really feeling that this was where God was leading us next. we didn't know to what. We just up and left and moved here to find ourselves at a small church, 12 people, all of them over the age of 60, and 3 of them over the age of 90. In a it was a dying church, and that's where movement really became real for me. Everything I had learned from Troy, I began to have to put that to practice because I no longer had any resources to impact lostness. Before, I could depend on students to go with me, or we had a budget that we had the resources to be able to put on a picnic or to gather people together. All of a sudden, I had no resources but myself and the gospel. And I said, well, I need to go. I'm called to go make disciples. And if these 12 people aren't going to come with me, and we don't have any resources to do anything with them, I still have to do that. And so I was there about a year. And in that time, I found myself kind of waging a two-front war. One was I was pastoring these people, giving them everything I had on a Sunday morning and shepherding them throughout the week as best as I could. And then there was the neighborhood, this lost and dying neighborhood, very far from God. And my heart just burdened for those people. And I was energized by that work. The pastoring and shepherding just drained me. At the end of a Sunday, I just wanted to come home and kick the dog and take a long nap, right? But being out in the neighborhood, developing these relationships, sharing the gospel with people, discipling people in their homes, that gave me life. And eventually, it's a really long story. God just took that whole thing away and left me with this vision for how do we reach Kansas City? Well, we just keep doing what we've been doing on a small scale, and we want to see the entire city reached. We want to see the needle moved in Kansas City. Yeah, we spent a lot of time on a house of peace searches. So the neighborhood we were in, it's kind of the bar district of Kansas City. So it's a young hipster culture and old hippie culture that lives there. And we just spent a lot of time engaging people. I remember my wife and I and our kids went out one day after preaching on Sunday. We went out to the street right behind the church, and we just started knocking on doors, asking if we could pray for people. And these 2 guys, they welcomed us into their home. They had a daughter together, and we just began to have this great conversation with them. And we got to share the gospel with them. We got to share our testimony with them. And they seemed very open and very receptive to that. And we began to just have this dialogue with them and conversations about what it would look like to follow God, to learn what it means to make Jesus the boss of their life. And but I just remember from that time their main hang up was that their own lifestyle and if they were going to have to surrender their lifestyle. And I remember they just got to the point where through this discussion, they just asked us, if we were to follow Jesus, does that mean we couldn't get married? Or, I said, well, the Bible clearly says that when we come to him, we're transformed, and our former desires are nothing like our new desires. And so no, I don't think if you follow Jesus, you would desire to be married. And at that, we were shown the door pretty quickly. But it was an indicator of really what conversations were like in that neighborhood. But we learned what it meant to persevere through a lot of difficult conversations and a lot of rejection as well. I had connected with an IMB worker named Jared, who was in Kansas City at the time. And he was forming kind of a small team in Kansas City. It was really spread out right at the same time that the things were really winding down with the established church. And he just wanted to gather like-minded believers together who had a passion for multiplication. And he began gathering us together and meeting on a bi-weekly basis. And really kind of the expectation was that everybody who was gathering was out sharing the gospel on a weekly basis. He kind of put the expectation that maybe 10 times a week we were sharing. And we would come together, and he led that for a few times and just cast vision for us. And I remember the second meeting, he said, well, I'm going to be gone the next time. And so Tom, why don't you go ahead and lead the meeting? I had no idea what we were doing. I was just there at Jared's request. And I said, okay. And honestly, I think that was one of the last few times I saw Jared, was at that second meeting. He began to travel, and he just kind of left this responsibility that he had casted vision for seeing Kansas City reach with the gospel. And I guess I out of necessity, just kind of grabbed a hold of it and said, all right, we're going to run with this, and we're going to champion this vision in Kansas City with that small group that was meeting on a regular basis. And so that propelled us forward and into a time of a lot of failure and a lot of bumps in terms of training and trying to catalyze other workers and inviting people into the work, as well as being out regularly doing the work. And so it just continued to kind of roll from there. We had some great guys in those early days. All of that team has since left Kansas City, not left the work, but they've all been taken out of this place. And so I guess the next big push was when those guys all left, particularly a guy named Adam and a guy named Omar. The three of us were kind of a core team in pursuing things, and they left at the same time at the beginning of 2017. They moved out, and at that point, I felt all alone in Kansas City. Here's 2.2 million people. 1.76 million of them are far from God, and I felt that all of a sudden I'm all alone. Jared had left. These guys had left. We had attempted to train a lot of people, but hadn't seen much success in that training. And at that point, just through Luke 10:2 prayers, I think, just consistently praying and fasting and asking the Father to send forth laborers, we began to find some new faces, some fresh faces, and began to invest our lives. And then just really persevering in, hey, let's model what it looks like to get out and harvest. Let's go. Let's do this together. And from that, I live in Kansas, but Missouri is called the Show Me State. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of that attitude of, hey, show me this works. And so that we just decided this is what we're going to do. So for those that committed, I put together a schedule of harvest time and said, hey, these are when I'm going to be in the harvest. Come join me in that. And invited people from the seminary up north and different churches. And from there, God just began to really answer a lot of those prayers. Started getting phone calls and began to see some cool things happen in the harvest as well. So,
how long had it been since you first connected with Troy before they went to Japan till this period? How many years had you been on the journey?
It had been 4 years. I was pursuing to be obedient to the call to go make disciples.
Yeah.
I knew I had to, and I knew that filled me. That gave me great joy, satisfaction in the spirit, is just obeying what he told me to do. And I just as I took little steps of there was no. Maybe there were some giant leaps, but it felt like there were just little steps, and I got further and further out there. And I remember probably in the beginning of 2006, so 4 years in, I look back and say, well, I cannot go back. I can't go back to doing things how I was, to a attractional model, an event-based model, in terms of not impacting lostness. Before I met Troy, I was never focused on. I thought I was focused on the nations, but I wasn't. I was focused on this small group that God entrusted to me. And I attempted to be faithful in that, but I was not focused on how do we impact lostness. And so that 4-year journey got me to the point where I just determined, well, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I can't go back to what I used to do. I couldn't. So the Father's heart kept me going. In those low moments, when I wanted to quit, when I still want to quit, I don't say this pridefully, but to think, well, if we don't pursue this, who will? Who will go after the nations right here in our own backyard? Who will take responsibility for that? Who will share the gospel today? And so, if we don't, as we got to know people from the harvest, as we got to know people who are far from God, I guess, just a love for them to know Jesus, to have an opportunity. We've been afforded this incredible opportunity to not only believe, but even to just hear. And some have never heard. Once we had a regular harvest times established, we said, let's just run after this. And we began to experience some things from the harvest, people trusting in Christ for the first time out of very difficult circumstances. We went from a phase of where we were sharing regularly and getting a lot of friendly, warm faces to we were sharing regularly and getting, you can follow up, to we were sharing and they were saying, we want to follow Jesus. We began, there's a part of Kansas City, it's downtown. It's a lot of immigrants, a lot of refugees are there. And we had some partners that lived there, some established churches that were getting out in the harvest with us. And so there's a particular community we had been in for quite a couple times, and we knocked on some doors in there, and we met a young woman who was there who seemed very receptive to the gospel. We were able to share with her. And she said, I would be interested in looking at the Bible with you. And so, well, that's great. We got her phone number. We came back. I think it was the very next day. I came back, and she wasn't there. I remember that. Yeah, she was not there. And I had brought a friend with me, and I was, really excited because I was going to model this for him. And all of a sudden she's not there. So we said, well, let's just walk back around the building. We had parked on the other side. And so we just started walking and we were praying. And as we came around the corner, I saw on the other side of the building, the woman we were looking for walked back. So we hustled back over there and we yelled her name and said, hey, and she recognized us and said, oh, I'm so glad you came. And we just approached her and we sat down and prayed for her again. And, as we sat there, two other women came out from the door that we had knocked on, and they didn't answer when we came back. So now we have these 3 ladies there, and Deborah and Alicia, and we're talking with them, and it was clear that 2 of them were partners, and once again we just began almost the same question I got 2 years prior. If I follow Jesus, do I have to give up this relationship? And we said, well, yeah. She knew, she had heard the gospel before Deborah had. And we shared the gospel. We shared quite a few stories. I think we shared the sinful woman story with her. And she said, I want to do this. I want to follow Jesus right now. And she knew what that meant. I mean, she had clearly said that she was going to turn from her. She's going to repent of her sin. She was going to turn from that. And not only that, but she wanted to get baptized right then. And so we walked her through what baptism meant. We explained that to her, and she went inside to go fill up the tub. And she didn't come back out for about 30 minutes. And we then got to have this conversation with these 2 other ladies that were there. And she eventually came back out, but she said that she had just been on her bed, just weeping, just repenting before the Lord, and just pouring out her heart to him. And we got to baptize her right then. And my friend Samuel did it. He did the baptism. As we're leaving their bathroom, we're walking out. Alicia says, "You know what? I prayed to follow Jesus today too. I meant that. I want to get baptized as well." And we said, "That's fantastic." So, Deborah, are you comfortable baptizing your friend Alicia now? And she said, "Me? What do you?" Yeah, we're like, well, yeah, we just showed you how to do it. Why don't you go ahead and we'll practice, and then you can do that. And we recorded this, and I love to go back and watch this because I'm the one holding the camera, but Samuel, who had baptized Deborah, was standing there, kind of assisting her now. And Alicia's in the tub, and she says she quotes the Great Commission to Alicia, and says, "Is that right?" She's looking over her shoulder, and it's like, "Are you gonna, Alicia, are you gonna follow Jesus with for the rest of your life?" Yes. And then she keeps just looking back at Samuel to see, like, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? And then she baptized her, and it was one of those situations. Her head didn't get all the way down, and Samuel then had to come in and assist, right, and fully assist her with that. And it was just it was an amazing picture to me, and to see that this true multiplication. It's messy. It doesn't always go as you think it will in your mind. But the joy that Deborah had in following Jesus, and then to be able to be used by Christ right there. She's asking questions. She's like, we're not the only ones that need to hear this story, guys. There's I can think back of all my former partners. They all need this story. And I know them all still. And so she began to put together this list of people that she was going to share the gospel with. So it's pretty. Just that moment though was one for me that just one of those things that just confirmed this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And all of a sudden the need for more laborers just became so apparent. Man, we're out here being faithful, and there's no way we can follow up with all of these people that are expressing a desire to be involved. And we met some key people at that point in time from other organizations, from other established churches that wanted to join in. Came to recognize, hey, we aren't alone. There's other people in the city that are doing what we're doing. Or similar enough that they're movement minded, that we could partner together in this. I think the biggest development for us is an understanding that though we would like to team up with everybody who's doing what we're doing, the end result of multiplication is a team of teams approach, is a coalition. If we want to see true gospel saturation, we have to release, we have to give it away. And so I think that's a difficult instinct to develop, because our attitude is always, let's gather that critical mass, let's celebrate what's happening here. And so over the past 6 months, we've really shifted that mindset from gathering the laborers, gathering the workers in a central location, to empowering each worker to form their own team, and creating enough of a support system to encourage these teams that are forming from the harvest, that are forming from established churches or different organizations, without killing it. Too much structure will just kill it. And so that's something we've wrestled through. I think our tendency is to over structure things and to kill the movement. And so that's where we are now, is seeing these teams emerge. I have a residency group of 4 men, all in their 60s and 70s. They're all retired. They're the old guys' residency, but they're owning the vision, right? And they're saying, we're gonna see no place left in our geographical area. And so it changes my relationship with them, that now it instead of convincing them from Scripture, man, I just want to empower them to duplicate themselves. And so I feel like that's where we are, is within as a city, trying to create momentum from other movements that are happening as well. There's a big DMM influence here in Kansas City, and we want to connect and partner with them for encouragement and to not neglect what we're doing, but say, man, this is bigger than any one of us. And let's celebrate everything that God's doing so we can see the true scope of the work throughout the city. The team is the seed of a church plant. Mm-hmm. And so they're going to plant themselves in a community, they're in a field where the church is going to gather around them. They're going to be laboring to do the work to see a church or multiple churches gather in that geographical area. So in coaching those teams, we're saying, okay, you need to, there's things that you have to be doing. We want to keep it local. We don't want to pull you into what we're doing. So you need to gather at church. You need to gather for accountability. You need to have a time of prayer and strategy. And then you need to be in the harvest regularly. So each team, those are the rhythms that we're really asking them to commit to as a team. And so they're not committing to those with us. They're committing to it with their team. So find your team. Who is it? Who are you running with in this? And when are you gathering for church? When are you praying and strategizing? When are you having accountability time? And when are you getting in the harvest? Yes. Ray is he's been a deacon most of his adult life at his Baptist church there. And Ray was just burdened for lostness. He was out regularly trying to reach refugees. And we trained him. We did some 4-on-1 training with him, and he was going out regularly. And he just began to ask the question, well, what about my neighborhood? I travel 30 minutes to go out here and share the gospel. Many of these people, I can't speak the same language as them, but what about my neighborhood? And so that was about the beginning of this year, 2018. And he just said, yeah, well, let's commit. I said, Ray, I'll go with you. Let's find the time, and we're going to go out in the harvest together. And so we committed to go out weekly together. And from that, so much happens in the harvest. We're not just engaging the harvest, but we're having conversations. Life is being shared as we walk door to door and spend time out there. We're praying together and begin to just coach him through how does he train his church. And sure enough, he begins to invite other guys from his church to come out with him. And we spend a lot of hours. So right now there's 3 guys from their church that are coming out regularly, but we spent probably 5 months looking for a house of peace in this neighborhood. We probably weren't going at the best time, but eventually we found a man named Daniel. And we rang his doorbell. It was one of those Ring doorbells with a video camera. And Daniel wasn't home. He answered from his phone. He was out at Chick-fil-A, and Ray offered to pray. And he said, well, I'm not home. You're really there to pray for me? I'll be home in 10 minutes. Wait there. And so Daniel comes home. And the whole time, really, I was just praying. The whole 4 months, I was praying that Ray would find someone to disciple. That's what it would take. That as his paradigm began to shift, he needed to be shown that this was valid. And so Daniel came to faith. Ray just began to invest in him. He had it because we had sat down and gone through the commands together as well. So he knew what to do, and he just began to do this. And all of a sudden, from that, Daniel's multiplying. Another guy who lives in that area has connected with Ray, and he's training people. And so they have a church that gathers on Tuesdays at the coffee shop. And we've seen that team really just commit to saying, we're going to see no place left in South KC. We're going to continue to labor. And really, it happened through one-on-one training and modeling. It wasn't the traditional catalytic route of that in terms of 3-touch training, event-based training. But from that, we've seen a really strong team emerge that's really committed to the work. So it all happened through the one man. It happened through Ray and his his buy-in and his partnership with other believers.